Oh, Queen Justice, where are you? Did they beat you up or no? Lock you on the ground, take the crown away from you?
Oh, Lady Liberty, red, white, and blue. Did they take your dignity with their bigotry? Teach you that you're born to lose.
Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you break.
We've had enough
of all the money you make.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. It's been 400 years and we're 400 late. Together we stand from state to state. Going back in time won't make America great. We need justice now, people won't wait. Action, no more distraction. Every step we take, we gain traction. If it can happen to one, it can happen to all. United we stand, divided we fall. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you were breaking.
We've had enough
of all the money you were making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is a proclamation. Free or guilty, it's gonna get filthy. Better believe, just roll up your sleeves. It's gonna get rough, it's gonna be tough. We all agree, we've had enough.
We've had enough
of all the rules you're breaking.
We've had enough.
All the money you're making.
We've had enough.
No more life gets taken.
We've had enough.
This is the proclamation. We've had enough. Trayvon Martin and Tommy Rice. We've had enough. Michael Brown and Eric gonna pay the price. We've had enough. Philando, Breonna, George Floyd.
What?
We've had enough. So many gone. How can we fill the void?
How can we feel?
We had enough.
Void?
John Crawford, I know you've heard. We've had enough. Sandra Bland, come on and take a stand. We've had enough. Sean Bell,
Sean Bell.
what the hell? We've had enough. Freddie Gray, did you hear what I said? We've had enough. This is a proclamation.
McFarlane, welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Mondays, we talk with people in community who want to be a part of the electoral process, people that want to represent you. We've been focusing on City Council in Minneapolis, but today we're pleased to have a newly announced candidate for the mayor of Minneapolis joining candidates for City Council. So let's get right into it. Before I start, thanks to my friend Ryan Listman and my brother Wayne McFarlane for that piece called Enough. It sets the mood for this conversation. It sort of reflects the tenor of our times. And I think we'll be using that for the next several days, along with the music that we normally use from Sounds of Blackness, that both characterize and reflect the spirit of the moment. There is a sense of we've had enough. Enough lies, enough deception, enough waiting, enough marginalization, enough insincerity, enough lack of authenticity. We have had enough. And so I bring that forward in today's program, asking those who are here today as candidates seeking to serve our city, on City Council, on mayor, to reflect on the meaning of that expectation as articulated by these great musicians. And as I am saying right now, there is a sense of having enough. What are we going to do about it? What are you proposing to do about it? Finally, if you're listening on YouTube, like the program, subscribe to the channel. If you're checking us out on Facebook, we want your comments. Put your comments in the comment section. We'll try to bring you into the conversation as well. Let's see. let me begin by introducing Kate Knuth. And Kate, you can correct me if I'm not pronouncing your name properly, but thank you for being here. You are a candidate for mayor of Minneapolis. You are currently a 3-term member of the Minnesota House of Representatives, representing the Bryn Mawr neighborhood, and you are assistant leader, I think, of the House of Representatives for the state of Minnesota. Good afternoon and welcome.
Hi, Al. Thanks for having me. Just to be clear, I previously served in the Minnesota House from 2007 to 2012. I'm not currently in the legislature.
Right. Okay.
I do live in the Bryn Mawr neighborhood of Minneapolis. I live near Worth Park, Worth Beach, and previously lived in the Seward neighborhood of Minneapolis.
And you're running for mayor?
And I'm running for mayor of Minneapolis. We announced last Tuesday.
So let's talk about that. Thank you for the clarification. Thank you so much. We're almost neighbors. I live up the street from you. I live on Plymouth Avenue, close to Plymouth Avenue on Thomas. So we're in the same general neighborhood, though there is a difference. But thank you for being here, and thank you for running for office. And I would like, Kelvin, if you're scheduling or showing what we're viewing, it would be kind of cool from time to time to show the entire panel that's here so people see who else in the studio today. But Kate, let me start with you. Did I say your name first of all properly? Kate Knuth?
It's Kate Knuth. You've got it right. Okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. So talk about why you chose to put your head in the ring. What vision do you bring? What are the priorities? And how do you address the turmoil that I have and am describing that I see exist in my neighborhood and within and from the cultural lens that I bring to community?
Yeah. Well, thank you for that question. I think it's spot on for the moment we're in. And the reason I decided to run is very rooted in the moment that our city is in. And I think we're at a transformative moment, potentially. And it's, as you said, people have had enough of these systems, the systems of public safety and policing, systemic racism, housing systems that leave many people unhoused or in unsafe or too expensive and secure housing situations. I come from a climate background. We're seeing, not always as immediately in our community, but we're seeing the impacts of climate change. If we were in Texas, you were feeling that immediately this last week. But it's clear that our systems aren't working in ways that allow every person in our city to live with dignity and security and to be engaged in public life with power and with agency and being part of the way we make decisions together. And as I look at the field of candidates, the current mayor, I've been frustrated with some of the ways he's approached leadership, not just in the past year. I think the past year has been the result of things that's happened over multiple years. And there's another candidate in the race, Sheila Nejad, who I'm very happy is in the race. And it felt like there's more space. There's more need for having a real deep, thoughtful, these things are hard. The moments we're in are scary. They're scary in different ways for different communities. As you pointed out, your community up at Plymouth and Thomas, where you live, versus parts of my neighborhood of Bryn Mawr or other parts of the city. But I feel the unsteadiness and the uncertainty, and I've been looking for a candidate and had some conversations with folks and didn't see one coming forward that I was really wanting to get behind. So I decided I feel a sense of responsibility to step up. And I bring an approach to leadership that's very values-based and collaborative. And I'm not going to say I have every answer to fix everything now. I know there's an urgency to fix particularly safety issues now. And we need to do the work of the deep systemic change that needs to happen so we don't keep having people hurt in their communities, both by community members and by the police. So I'm stepping forward with a sense of responsibility, a sense of asking the city to step forward with courage in this moment, and being part of the conversation that is a campaign in a way that will help us govern, should we be honored to do so come January.
JD is online on Facebook and asking that he hear from you and other candidates about specific, concrete, actionable solutions. He says, we know the problem and he doesn't want to glorify it. What are the actions you'll take? So let's do this. Kate, articulate 5 problems and 5 solutions, just briefly, top of mind, or 3 is fine.
Okay. Okay. You're just straight to the point. I appreciate that. I think one challenge I'm seeing, this is a governance challenge. It's not as immediately obvious to people, but I think there's been frustration at the way the council and the mayor have worked together, or not in many situations, and the lack of communication and frankly, the lack of trust. And so setting up structures and intention and real openness to that we're not always going to agree working as a council and mayor, but that we are always going to be working together for the good of the city and for the people in the city. So that's one real actionable thing. I think when you're asking candidates about, when you're thinking about supporting candidates or going through things like campaigns, that how you're actually going to do the job is also really important. It's not only the specific policies, but how you actually make them happen and work through the process of governing the city. So that's one specific thing. On public safety, I do support a charter change. It's not to say we get rid of police immediately, but I support it because I think we need to open the door to really do something different, some specific things. When we have some sort of crisis in a neighborhood or with an individual, with a family, we meet that crisis with the response that's needed, not that the response that's there. The response that's there right now is armed law enforcement, and that's not always needed, and that's not always what makes people feel safe. So an example from my own family, my dad passed away from Alzheimer's recently and became aggressive towards the end of his life. One of the most gentle people I've known, and he became aggressive. And the only person my mom could call was someone with a gun. And that my family's white, and so she's more comfortable doing that. Like, let's clearly name that. But it wasn't the response my family needed. And I think people in the city know they want to have someone to call and help in crisis. They don't always want a person who's an armed law enforcement officer to show up. So meeting the specific need with a response that's useful and appropriate and that's actually helpful in the moment is one specific. In terms of housing, I think housing is another one of those things that's going to take multiple things. Like, these deep systemic challenges are going to take more than one action. So I support raising some property tax levy for public housing. I support meeting the response of people being unhoused in our public spaces, and not only a park. I mean, I pass an encampment that's not in a park every day when I take my daughter to school. Making sure that the city shows up not in a way that re-traumatizes folks in that situation and helps move them into housing situations that make sense. I could do a few more, but that's a start. I think that was 3. And I'm also really interested to hear from the other candidates, because the other thing I think I want people to know is that I come with a deeply held set of values and an experience working on complex systemic challenges, particularly from the climate space, experience translating the significant change into big institutional and government settings, both at state government, some in city government, also at the university. And that's a skill in itself, and I think something we should expect from our elected officials. But I'm not going to claim I have every single answer to every single problem. So part of it is bringing forward the voices, both the lived experience and the knowledge we have through research to find the solutions that have the best chance of really getting the outcome we want.
I'm going to ask you and the other candidates today to give me your assessment on how you're processing the trial that's about to open up, what's in your mind right now? What are your fears and expectations that will or can happen as the city and the nation actually move towards the jury selection and the beginning of the Derek Chauvin trial? So take a minute just to give me impressions, and we'll come back and dive more deeply a little later. And Kate.
I'm sorry, I'm having a little bit of challenge with the stream, so I'm not sure if you can hear me well or not. I apologize for that.
No, I hear you well.
Okay, good. You're a little, I didn't catch much of that question. I think you were asking about the trial.
Let me say it again. I'll say it again. Just give me your impressions. How do you sort of assimilate today? How do you assemble today what it means and what's going on? The whole town, the country, the world is watching Minneapolis right now, and just what's in your mind. How do you think about what we're doing through our system and process today? Are you able to hear? You're not able to hear me?
I'm hearing about every third or fourth word. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's going on with my internet today.
I understand. Does anybody else hear me okay? You guys hear me or not?
Yeah, we can hear you. You're good.
Okay. So, George Floyd impressions.
If I could just share, I think that, like you said, the world's watching. Just came from California to bury.
No, not yet, Victor. I wanted to finish up with Kate, if I could.
Okay, no problem.
So, yeah. So, Kate, we'll come back to you. Maybe we'll get a better connection later.
Sorry about that. I'm still having a hard time. But in terms of
not a problem. Thank you
the
for being
world
here.
watching our city as we're starting this trial.
Yeah.
Is that
what are you feeling? Yeah.
What the question is?
Yes.
You know, I was downtown yesterday as part of the march, mourning victims of police violence in George Floyd. And I think what I'm sensing is a sense of, there's a sense of grief and loss and a sense of anxiety about what could come out of this. I mean, let's just name it. We've never had a white police officer convicted for killing a Black man. And given the brutality of this particular case and the unrest and we've had enough, as the song at the beginning framed up this conversation, I think it's bringing up a lot. And I feel good about the prosecution. I'm very glad that Attorney General Ellison has been brought in because I think that's who's needed. And I think there is, for good reason, a lack of trust in the system. And so I'm hopeful that our justice system moves through, and I'm through in ways that get justice. And we know it's deeper than one trial or one instance of getting justice. It's moving to the kinds of system, the system that will actually keep every person in our community safe. So we never have to have another question about a trial for a police officer having killed a person in our community or hurt a person in our community. So I didn't fully get the question. I hope I'm answering it or addressing it. That's a hard question, particularly to be talking about as the stream isn't totally working on my end. Was that addressing the question
That's
you
fine.
had asked?
Yeah. Thank you. Let me move on. Thank you so much, and stick around because we'll come back to you again. So for the rest of the program, I want to introduce candidates.
Thank you.
That's fine. I want to bring in candidates for city council, different city council wards, and we have two members on the call who are seeking office in 5th Ward, the incumbent Jeremiah Ellison, and the second person is Victor Martinez. So we'll talk to those two first, and then we'll talk to Mike Rainville, who's seeking office in 3rd Ward, then Alicia Gibson seeking in 10th Ward, and after that Tekken, who is seeking office, Tekken Zaya Aida, seeking office in the 7th Ward. So let me begin with Jeremiah Ellison. Jeremiah, welcome. I'm asking you to go first because Victor's been here at least once already, maybe twice, and I've invited him and all these candidates to come every Monday. And my objective, the Insight News objective, is to keep the conversation going and provide a platform for people that want to serve our city to bring their voices, their ideas forward, and to have that be on our social media, but also in our newspaper as well. So thank you for joining the call today.
Yeah,
take a minute, Jeremiah, for background about your being the incumbent and what your priorities have been and are as the incumbent, and what you want to say about seeking re-election.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you for providing this platform. And I think it's incredibly important for us to talk about what's going on in our city, what's going on the north side in particular. And folks know that in 2017 I ran for office. Prior to running for office, I worked with youth. I worked at Juxtaposition Arts, and I worked at Youth Homeless Shelter Avenues, and I worked as a lifeguard. And that's been sort of my legacy so far on the north side, obviously born and raised as well on the north side. In 2017, the important issues then are similar to what the important issues are now, which is that we have got to provide people with housing stability. We have got to get people employed, and we have to make sure that folks are earning their income and that we're promoting our local talent when it comes to local businesses and local entrepreneurs. I've done a lot of work on both fronts. And obviously, especially after this most recent tragic year, we have got to make North Minneapolis a more peaceful place, a safer place. And so that is a top priority for me, is addressing the homicides that we've had in the past year, and addressing not only the root causes, but also how we approach public safety in a more direct way.
Okay, and then priorities. One of the questions that came up was Hillary Thomas. You know Hillary, a neighbor of ours. What's more important for our city right now? Building new homes and commercial space, or rehabbing and expanding, better utilizing our existing homes and storefronts? What do you think?
Man, I think the two are not mutually exclusive. Often we sort of pit the two against each other, right? I know folks are fearful that every house in North Minneapolis is going to be a triplex. But I think that the reality is that people who want to live in a single family home are going to have an option to live in a single family home. They do, and they will continue to have that. I also think that it's important for us to build new spaces for people, right? We've seen our neighborhoods that if we don't invest in them, we see that our neighborhoods will gentrify. We've seen property values go up in North Minneapolis by as much as $30,000 for a property. And so we've seen people's lives become less affordable. That means that we're going to have to continue to make investments on affordability. And so I think that the two are not mutually exclusive. I think that we need to continue to build new housing. It needs to be affordable housing, and we can debate the levels of affordability. But I absolutely think that we've got to invest in making housing stability our priority.
I made the mistake of saying that it was only for the 5th Ward, you and Victor Martinez, but Elijah Norris is also here in this call. So Elijah, apologies for not putting your name in there at the same time. And so Jeremiah, your impressions, what's on your mind as the city and as the county move towards the trial downtown? What are you thinking about?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to have my ear to the ground, same as back in June. I think anybody who was paying attention back in June kind of could tell that we were sitting on a powder keg, and anybody who was down at the 3rd who saw the onslaught of chemical irritants and flashbang grenades knew that we didn't do everything we could as a city to de-escalate that situation. And eventually, 2 days later, you saw a fire started, and once the fire started, there was no de-escalating the situation. But we did have 2 days to get ahead of that. The barriers that we've put up around City Hall, I think, send the wrong message. I think that they send the message that we're afraid of our people that we represent. I think that they don't acknowledge that this entire ordeal was sparked by police action, and that people are angry about police action. We could have invested a lot of time in engaging with organizations like yourself to help people understand what we are doing to make sure that somebody like George Floyd's never murdered again in our city. And we didn't take that time. Instead, we built up razor wire fences, and I think it was the wrong approach. That being said, from everything that I'm hearing on the ground, from people who are planning marches, there's an atmosphere of hope and determination, and that I don't believe that we're sitting on the same powder keg that we were sitting on back in June. I do think that again that things could escalate if we don't find a way to honor people's feelings. But I'm not. I'm hopeful that that's not where we're at.
Elijah, are you on the call still, Elijah Norris? And if you're not, why don't you come back on, because I want your voice in this conversation as well. I see a comment from Elijah on the comment section, but he should be on the call. Let me go to Victor Martinez. Victor, how are you doing, my friend? Good to see you again. Thank you for being here. So state the case for the Victor Martinez candidacy for 5th Ward.
Yeah, thank you. Doing well. I just got back last night, so I'm a little jet lag from a funeral with my grandma in Los Angeles. But coming back to
COVID related?
No, not COVID, diabetes, and try to visit her, but waited, and I guess I waited a little too long, and so there's always those regrets. Yeah, thank you. But coming back to the city, like the rush of what's happening, the emotion of what's happening is very powerful. What I want to see in the city right now is an opportunity for our leadership to come together. I think that it causes a lot of division. It causes a lot of frustration for the citizens when they can't hear a one voice from our city and our leadership. And that's my aspirations for the city, that my hope is that no matter what the outcome is, that there's got to be some unity in terms of what we're going to say, what we're going to do moving forward. Like Kate said, this is bigger than just one case. Whether the case goes on the side that we want it to or not, there's still an issue long term. But what I'm saying for the north side is, and Elijah said it exactly right. We've been talking about the same things for a long time. I've been here 17 years, and we've been talking about jobs and safety for 17 years. People that have been around longer than I have said, Victor, we've been talking about it for 40 years. And I think that the important thing is that we need to keep accountable to those things that we've been asking for 40 years. I talked to William, the ex-ED from Phyllis Wheatley back in the day after the riots, and he was like, Victor, this is what we did during those riots. After those riots, the city came together, the government came together and said, what do we want? The community here in North Minneapolis said it overwhelmingly, we want jobs. And for 40 years, we've had a struggling business corridor, the only one left in the city that's really this bad. And it's like, if we're talking about jobs and opportunities, why aren't we getting them yet? And I feel like the leadership that we've had for the last 40 years hasn't given those things. So when you talk about enough is enough, we need to, those that are connected to the ground and know these things, well, guess what? We've been asking the same thing for a long time. And those are the things we need to keep accountable, not asking what is going on now. Well, we know what's been going on for the last 40 years, and we need to hold those things accountable. That's where I stand. And I believe that that's what I could do and really keep accountable to Broadway. When I talk to constituents here, I've talked to over 300 in the last 4 months. They say, hey, we need Broadway to come back. We need businesses, those storefronts you're talking about earlier. Those are the easiest and the easiest place for businesses to start. Storefronts that are available, storefronts that could be opened up, but nobody's really bringing together the work on Broadway to make it happen. And that's what I'm going to do. That's half my platform right there. The other half is really curbing crime through youth diversion. 15 teenagers killed over the summer is unacceptable. Most of them coming from the north side, African-American young men. It is unacceptable that is happening. When I was in high school, I was told that you would know one kid in your life, in your high school career that loses their life. Well, what if you know 10 of them? What if you know 15 of them? How are you expecting our struggling public school system to even get an advantage or get growing and get better when those kids in the community, in the schools, every month, one of their classmates is dying? And kids from North and Patrick Henry, where I graduated, they know each other. Guess what happens when every month one of your classmates die, one of your friends die? It's not good for our community. And those are the two things I want to do and that we should be doing for a long time.
What's the George Floyd trial mean to you? What are you feeling as you watch our city and community prepare for that?
It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart. The whole process, everything breaks my heart.
I called it George Floyd. Obviously, it's the Derek Chauvin trial for the murder of George Floyd.
I understand. We definitely want to keep his name in the front. So I understand when people say that. But you're right. I think it breaks my heart that what happened. When I saw that video, it broke my heart. I cried. I'm like, it's just humanity, the brokenness of humanity in a broken world and a broken system. And we're left as leaders and as pastors and people in the community to try to put those pieces together and heal those relationships. So my hope is that we heal. Again, this trial is not just a one thing is going to fix everything, but it's like, how do we use these opportunities to show the world that we're together? Not that we're divided, not that you're in your corner, I'm in my corner, and calling each other out and cancel culture. And I'm about calling people in, not about calling people out and putting them in the corner, because that's what cities that struggle with crime and prosperity, cities that don't work well together, are typically those cities that are divided.
Did we lose Elijah Norris and Alicia? Elijah, if you're there on Facebook, sign back in because we want to talk to you as well. And also same with Mike Rainville, who was on the call in Tekken.
Hey, Al.
Yes, go ahead.
Someone asked, is asking us to get real specific, and I'd love to be able to get real specific here on this call if we've got a moment.
Absolutely. That's the next question. Give me three things, 3 problems and 3 specific solutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So, one, I want to talk about the economic development front. Prior to getting in office, there were a number of issues that I saw with access to capital, with Jamez Staples' youth employment, job training program kind of being stuck in a myriad of development red tape. And I've done some work to address those things. One is we were having some trouble getting the green energy job training program online. I worked with the Met Council, worked with Jamez, and worked with the city staff to rework that application so that it reflected what Jamez intended to do. And now, if anybody who can drive down Plymouth and see that his operation is up and running, if you go up on the roof, which is obviously you can't see from the road, it is packed with solar panels. And so we're already getting results there from a project that, for 2-3 years prior to me coming into office was sort of stuck at a crossroads. The other thing, you talk about West Broadway, one of the things that people, that business owners, that the folks who really help create our corridors and make them happen, folks lack access to capital. So I worked with city staff. I created and the mayor's office to create the Commercial Property Development Fund. So what the Commercial Property Development Fund does is it allows folks to fill that gap, right? Commercial space can be incredibly expensive, and people can't necessarily, they can only take on so much debt service. With the Commercial Property Development Fund, which sort of has maybe a kind of a milquetoast name, but really the fund is designed to get local businesses owning the buildings that they operate out of. And we're seeing that fund get put to work in North Minneapolis. We're seeing that fund get put to work on 927, which is being renovated. Someone else put in the chat that it's actually not that incredibly easy. You see when you see a storefront to get them up and running, it can take, especially given the lack of attention that some of these storefronts have gotten along West Broadway, it could take $500,000 to get a store or more to get a storefront just functioning, basically safe, right? You look at Choi's out of body, you're talking about industrial pollution at that small site. You're going to have to remediate that. And so another thing that we've done on the north side is we've gone after those brownfield grants to remediate a lot of that toxic soil that was dumped on North Minneapolis 100 years ago, so that we can have sites that are safe for people to live on. The other is affordable housing. I'll try to keep it a little shorter on this front because it's pretty simple.
Take your time.
Okay, we've built more affordable housing since I've been in office than in many years prior. When you look at the Redwell building, which is actually in North Loop, actually a pretty wealthy area of the ward, they wanted to make that into a market rate development. And after some conversations with the developers there, they took it upon themselves to say, you know what, we do need the city taking on affordable housing in even the wealthy parts of the city. And now the Redwell is 100% affordable project. Obviously, we've seen Great River Landing come online, also in the North Loop area. But also in Harrison, we've got the art space coming, getting over the hump. And we've got the Olson townhomes. For anybody who knows about the Olson townhomes, they were built on bad soil. They've been sinking for the past 25 years. The city and other departments have been dumping money into trying to renovate these spaces, and people have aged in place. They've been great for stability, but they haven't been the most high quality housing. We're getting Olson townhomes redeveloped into a new space that can be a new build, larger footprint, larger square footage than those residents currently have. And they're going to be able to live in a much better, a much more dignified situation. These are all things, and that project was stuck at the state level. The state didn't want to fund it. And I was able to go to the state and appeal to them and get that project online. Lastly, while the entire country has seen an increase in violence in this past year, I know that it can be really convenient for some folks to reduce that violence to being localized here in Minneapolis. But New York, Chicago, cities all over the country have seen this increase in violence. Economics is absolutely plays a role in that. But so does public safety and how we've done public safety. A part of why our policing institution finds it so difficult to engage with our community is because there's a lack of trust. And you absolutely have those folks. You've got a small subsect of folks who say, hey, we need more police. Absolutely, no question. You've got a small subsect of folks who say, hey, we need abolition. We don't need police. But for most of us, I'd say 80% of folks on the North Side, they're dealing with this, what I call a paradox. And the paradox is they don't want to call police. They might even personally fear the police, but they absolutely heard gunshots down their street the night before, or they had their car broken into, and they don't know who else to engage with. And so that's a public safety system that's failing on all levels. I think that we've got to invest on three fronts, which we're doing. We've got to be able to invest in violence prevention. You talk about getting at those young folks who are engaged in violence. Some of these folks, we might not necessarily have enough evidence to build a case against them, but we know that there are actors in our community who are both victims and perpetrators of violence. The Office of Violence Prevention can engage with those folks and say, hey, look, we know you don't want to lose your life. Let's work with you and get you on a different path. And as much airtime as the Office of Violence Prevention has gotten, I think a lot of people haven't recognized that until very, very recently, the office was just 4 people, right? That's not a real division. Now we're creating a real division that can address violence citywide. And we're just starting that work this year. And then the last thing I'll mention, but it's not the last thing we're doing on safety, is that mental health response, right? The tragic case of Travis Jordan was a failure of public safety on multiple levels. You have a situation where his family members are calling, trying to get help because he's threatening to harm himself, right? But then you have the police showing up, and he's brandishing a knife, and they kill him. Well, who was served public safety wise in that situation? Not Travis Jordan, who was having a mental health crisis and threatening to harm himself, right? Not his family members who called to get help for him, but instead ended up having to watch him die. And not the police officer, who likely did not show up to the situation wanting to kill anyone, but was presented with a set of circumstances that he was undertrained for, understaffed for, and quite frankly, not qualified for. We failed the police officer, Travis Jordan, and his family in that situation. I think it is incumbent on us to create a public safety system that doesn't produce that kind of outcome.
Jeremiah, that's great responses. So Elijah is back. Elijah, thought I lost you for a second. Glad you jumped back on. And this is informal, but the goal is to bring the ideas. And so I'm going to ask you, as I asked Victor, to once again state the case for your candidacy for City Council. And what has emerged here is a general question asking each of you, and I'll come back to you for this, Victor, to be specific, to say or name 3-4 problems and specific solutions that you're going to provide to those problems that you say that you've defined as critical issues for our community. So Elijah Norris, go ahead.
I want to repower the police by working with Chief Arredondo and figuring out creative ways where we can provide more support to our police officers and how we can do police reform simultaneously. I don't believe we need to go off and create a whole entirely new department to serve our people. Mr. Ellison, you were right that when we have high concentrated areas of poverty, it does lead to crime. And that's happening all over the country. You're correct in that. And you also should know how many people in North Minneapolis are, in fact, living in poverty. Close to 60% of the people that live here are making less than $50,000 a year. Actually, 45% of the people that live here are making less than $30,000 a year, family household income. And those statistics have been around for years in the north side of Minneapolis. There's a lot of people here who rent. There's a lot of people here who have low educational attainment. So that's also a part of addressing public safety. I completely agree with you. But we also need to get more police officers on the street, well-trained police officers, people who are familiar with our community, people who are interested in forming more relationships with people in the community. That has to happen. And that's a part of police reform. And so my approach to that is relying on the experts in the field. I think we have a very competent police chief. I believe in his abilities. I believe that he has not been supported in the way he needs to by the current city council. Mr. Ellison, you're included in that. And also Philippe Cunningham have made some poor decisions. And they've openly outed the police chief, in my opinion, and spoke bad about the police chief in a time where we need to bring people together and work as one front. And that just shows poor leadership, in my opinion. The second thing, I want to develop a Ward 5 comprehensive plan or a general plan. And that we're going to align the neighborhood associations, other stakeholders in the community, and we're going to come up with a solid proposal, a solid plan to really get this ward on the right track. I hope that other wards would take heed to it and implement something of its sort. And with this comprehensive plan, we're going to take our time to construct it. We're going to build this thing out. So we have a 20-year plan, a 5-year plan. So that's addressing the short-term needs of our community and the long-term needs of our community, much similar to a 2040 comprehensive plan that we have in the city of Minneapolis, right? This is where we want to go. This is how we get there. I want to really network with people in the private sector, bring more jobs to North Minneapolis. We need to form better relationships with the colleges and technical schools that are in our local areas and figure out creative ways where we can find funding within the city of Minneapolis for young folks to go off and get a technical degree or an advanced degree and actually come back and work in the city of Minneapolis. We have so many Fortune 500 companies that are based right here in the state of Minnesota. We're the richest state right now for per capita income. How are we forming those partnerships with the private sector to get our young people in these fields? We know manufacturing right now, I'm experiencing a huge job shortage right now. Automotive industry, job shortages right there. Technicians, plumbers, all these jobs that we can create right here in North Minneapolis and get some young people making money. I believe when we get young people engaged and making money, we'll see a lot of the crime decrease because they're focusing on getting some money in their pockets and taking care of their families. Right now, they have no jobs. They have no pathways to success. And currently, the city council is not having a conversation on how we provide more opportunities to our residents. So I think I hit on all three of the things that I had right there, Mr. McFarlane.
Victor Martinez, 3 problems, 3 solutions.
Number one, when Jeremiah, and I appreciate the work he's done, but when I think of like access to capital, my question is for who? I talked to AJ that owns over on Lowry. I've talked to Faduma. She had a restaurant. She turned into a hair braiding business. Lee, he runs a convenience store out of the 5 Corners. Casey, that owns a braiding. And they tell me, this is what they tell me. They say, Victor, since last year, since the riots, since all that happened, nobody has come to talk to me. That they told me that personally. They didn't know about the opportunities that Broadway, the West Broadway Business Coalition had. Like there's opportunities, they raise money and they had no idea that there was money for them. Like nobody engages. There's this thing in the city right now where if you're not on the email list, you don't know. And nobody's engaging those business. So you're great. We have a fun. Absolutely. Let's do it. Other part is like Keith Redmond is one of the owns so much property on Broadway. He's been absent on Broadway for the last decade. And when I talked to him and say, hey, what does it take to get your storefronts open? He doesn't say he needs remodeling. He doesn't say he needs like these big things. In fact, he just uses it for storage. He has another location right on Penn and Broadway that it's perfectly fine, but he uses it for storage. And I say, hey, what does it take for you to open these businesses and give someone an opportunity to be in there? Well, that's a great idea. But Victor, like if the city owns all these lands and properties and buildings, and their buildings look worse than mine, what gives me a desire to want to fix mine? And so if the city is one of the worst slumlords in the city is one of the worst slumlords on Broadway, like it took a long time even to get those twin buildings right there in front of McDonald's to be covered up. right? I remember being here and it was terrible. Like, this is what our kids see. Like, it took decades for that to happen. Now, why don't we work on the rest of the buildings that make the rest of our community look bad? Why don't we work on, like the liquor store on Broadway right there, Merwin's? Well, guess what? During the winter, it was one of the dirtiest sidewalks you would ever see in North Minneapolis. There was snow piled up. It looked like there was feces in there. It looked garbage was in there. And like, where is the city to keep that business accountable? Everybody's saying, let's work on Merwin's. Why is that creating crime and infestation over there? Well, guess what? The city doesn't do anything to prevent it, to back up his ordinance. Like the guy I talked to, Pastor Edrin over there at Sanctuary Covenant Church, he told me, Victor, people buy liquor, they drink it right there in front of the business and then go right back in. Guess what? The city, that shouldn't be happening, but nobody's enforcing it. So let's enforce some of our basic policies. And I agree. Let's be specific. Let's enforce our policies. Let's get these businesses, make sure that the businesses and buildings that the city owns are presentable. Like lick them or something, right? Like put something on them. Just like we did with those twin buildings right there, put something on them, activate them. And that's why one of my plans is to activate 100% of our businesses. We probably have about 40 different businesses, properties on Broadway. Let's activate them. Doesn't mean you got to get business in there right away, because like Jeremiah said, some of these businesses, for sure, they need a lot of money to get going. But can we cover them up to make them look a little pretty? Right? Can we make them look a little decent for our community, for our kids walking down and saying, this is what I deserve, this is what I get? And guess what? They live like that. Guess what they're going to expect in their life? They're going to expect the same thing over and over. Trashy place to live in, trashy businesses to go to. We need to be an example. The city needs to be an example. We need to be bringing people together on Broadway. These businesses say, how do we change it together? Because you don't go to one business and say, hey, you one business, you better get it right. But then they look across the street and the other building, it's just as bad, if not worse. It has to be together. And then that takes leadership. It takes everybody working together. And that's exactly what I want to do. And I think that's a huge part of creating not only business in North Minneapolis, but giving that perception of like North Minneapolis has good business. North Minneapolis, every building is activated, whether there's a beautiful canvas on it or whether there's a small little mom and pop business right there in the corner. We need to be able to help these things.
So we're getting down to the end of this program. My colleague here is Diana Hawkins from Harrison Neighborhood Council. Diana, thank you for being here. If you have questions, just jump in. If you don't, thank you.
Let's correct that and say Hawthorne. Thank you, Jeremiah Neighborhood Council. Let's correct that, okay, Mr. L.
Did I say Hawthorne? What did I say?
You said Harrison. You said,
boy, yeah.
Another great neighborhood, though.
Thank you.
Okay. That's okay. But I do want to say something to Victor. Victor, I do want to address something that you said with regards to West Broadway, and I know Jeremiah is going to jump in here too. But I just want you to know, as a person who has been on the West Broadway Coalition for over 20-something, 30 years, and I was part of the West Broadway Alive, it don't always happen the way that you think it happens. You got to have the right kind of people in there. You got to have the right kind of capital in there. You got to have the right kind of builders in there. It took us years to get those twin buildings wrapped. Am I right, Jeremiah? I mean, years. So, I mean, it seems easy, but it's not. It's really not. So it's the work that has to be put in. You know what I mean? We can all say we want to do this, but you got to have it, and you got to have the right people to get it done.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. If I could just real quickly just say, and the reason one of those buildings is able to come online and be activated right now is because of the Commercial Property Development Fund, right? If you've got a business that has to, for the sake of argument, if you have a building that's going to take $2 million to bring up to being workable, but the local business owners can only take on, $1.5 million worth of debt service, right? You need something like the Commercial Property Development Fund to fill that gap. So that it's not contributing to their monthly rent, their monthly mortgage, but that it does allow them to secure the building and activate it. We got Calvin Littlejohn going to be going in that building. He not only has his business, his construction business over north, he lives over north. And so you asked about capital for who? It's capital for Northside businesses. And while the Commercial Property Development Fund, I hope to grow it. It's a brand new fund. It's only been around for 2 years, but it's already putting in work. We're already seeing that not only 927, but potentially a few other businesses up in Ward 4 are going to be able to take advantage of that fund as well. And so this is capital for local businesses, and so far it's been capital for Black-owned businesses on the north side. And Diana's absolutely right. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of effort, and it takes getting creative and making that hard ask to say, hey, look, we need this fund. I advocated it for a year and a half before we actually advocated for it for a year and a half before we actually got it. But when we got that that pool of money together, it's a zero interest due on sale loan. That means that it doesn't accrue as it sits under there, and you don't have to pay it back until you sell the building. Which by that point, hopefully, you've seen some equity grow on that building. So just wanted to let me bring other council members into the conversation. I want to go with Alicia first, Ward 10 candidate, then Michael Rainville, candidate for Ward 3, then Tikan Zaya Aida, Ward 7 candidate. This has been a spirited conversation. I want to thank everybody that's here for being here. And let's pass the microphone around. First of all, Alicia, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having us on. And I think it's really important that we were all here to hear from people from North Minneapolis talking about different perspectives and really getting into the nitty-gritty. So I actually really appreciated being able to sit on this call and hear this with such detail. So thank you. I'm just going to go ahead and tackle this 3 ideas and 3 specifics question. So, and it kind of dovetails with the question you had asked earlier about how we're feeling in this moment. So my background, as some of you know, is started out training in peace and conflict resolution studies. And so, and then I went to law school and, studied the ins and outs of the traditional judicial system. I ended up going back to school. I wanted to become a professor in part because, especially after studying federal Indian law, I have to admit that there was a lot of cynicism for me about the judicial system and its place as a site for justice. And so I bring that to this moment very personally. And there was hosted a community conversation a week ago with Malika Iban from the Legal Rights Center, and we talked about this. And I said, for me, the idea of justice, I hope to see it. I want to believe in the rule of law because it's really important to have a functioning society, especially one as heterogeneous as ours is. You need a rule of law. But I'm not putting all of my eggs in that basket. I'm putting my eggs in you guys. I'm putting my eggs in us. And so I think that in order to create that basket that can hold us, that can hold a place, of justice, we need to we cannot pass go. We have not done the work of hearing from community about the trauma of hundreds of years of racialized brutality. We have not heard from community on a precinct by precinct basis about what people want in policing, about what people want in safety. We have not done this. We have blown right through this. And as somebody who is trained in looking at large-scale international conflict and how people who have experienced very serious traumas like what we have experienced and more, that is the first thing you have to do. And we have not done it. So I'm calling for precinct by precinct truth and reconciliation processes so that each part of our city has the ability to as individuals and as communities to really engage this in a very deep and powerful way, create that, using my academic words, that liminal space that we can then create something new and move on, into the future. The second part of that is that I want us to create restorative justice centers. And this goes back to my wanting to find, alternate ways that are not necessarily in opposition to the Western legal system, but can contribute and kind of work as an alternate path. And I know for sure I want to have at least one restorative justice center in Ward 10. I would love to work with all of the council members and the mayor across the city so that we have at least one restorative justice center in operation in each part of the city where we can divert youth. We can actually also divert police officers who have complaints from community, and they can get right with community through a restorative justice process. And then the third thing, I love that what Elijah Norris said about alignment of the ward, that is one of his goals. And that's actually one of my goals too. So, as I presented to a small business association and had a plan for, we're going to have small business summits on a quarterly basis to get all of the small businesses, whether they're in an association or they're outside of an association, in alignment, and identify priorities and identify problems that they can work on together. And I want to do the same thing with the neighborhoods. Specifically here, we're talking about housing, to build visions of development for each neighborhood. And then they have scorecards, and you can look at West St. Paul. They have an excellent example of doing this. And I would love to see this partner with council members again and the mayor to see this happen across the city, and then this be taken seriously at the Planning Commission. And in addition, in this totality of the moment that we are living in, I have a plan for housing reparations using the neighborhood association home loan programs that we already have, because we know that Black families, individuals coming from Black families, are $10,000 behind at least. That contributes to the housing gap.
Let's delve into that more deeply next week. I'm fascinated by the question of reparations and a strategy to make that real on the local level. We're really out of time now. I want to tell Michael, Rainville, and Tegan, apologies. This has been a great conversation, but give you a few seconds. I'm interested in your impressions, if you don't mind, the 60-second impression about what today means, the start of the Derek Chauvin trial, to you as a human being, as a member of community, and as a person seeking office in Minneapolis. First of all, Michael Rainville.
Thank you, Al. Very briefly, I have great hope with this trial. I see that the Attorney General's office got involved. The BCA is getting involved in all these officer shootings. So we're changing as a society, and we're doing a great job doing that. I predict that the marches will be very peaceful. But part of that piece is because the authorities are prepared. It looks really bad to have that barbed wire and fencing around everything, but in lieu of what happened on West Broadway and Lake Street, perhaps as necessary. I cannot judge that. The final results would be there. People destroyed hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property, and there's no call for that. So I thank you for your allowing me to come today, and I really thank you for this forum, because I found it fascinating what my neighbors in the 5th Ward are talking about. It really opened up my eyes a lot. Thank you. I'll see you next Monday, Al.
Great, excellent. And taking 90 seconds.
Yeah, just I think that Minnesota is being given the opportunity to do the right thing. I'm not going to make any judgment on whether we're going to be able to meet that challenge, but we've been given a global opportunity with pretty much the eyes of the world on us to right some systemic wrongs that are, quite frankly, the foundation of our state. And so I remain in prayer, I guess I'll say, that, like I said, we do the right thing. Aside from that, I was happy to hear some friends and some neighbors from the north side talk about some issues that also impact downtown, my part of downtown, as it relates to small business, home ownership, affordable housing, you name it. So I'm excited to keep these communications going. Thank you.
Let's do it again next Monday. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Every Monday, we'll be talking about opportunities to serve you, the residents of Minneapolis, and we're discussing the issues of our neighborhood, but also the issues of the world. Join us next Monday. We'll see you. Take care. Thank you.